Hey everybody, welcome to Righteous Savages. We've got a really special guest today, old friend of mine, Dave Grossman with Grossman on Truth. Stick around, you're going to want to watch this all the way to the end. All right, so here we are with a good friend of mine, Dave Grossman. We kind of go way back. We'll get into that here in a little while. But for those of you who don't know Dave Grossman, who have never heard of this guy before, I'll give a quick little intro, tell everybody about you real quick. So Dave is a family man, husband, grandfather, military veteran. He is a Army Ranger, Lieutenant Colonel, retired from the Army. Whoa. Author, trainer, prolific trainer of military and law enforcement all across the country. And he's been on the road averaging over 200 days every year on the road for probably 2 decades or more, I guess, at this point. So a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Oh, Dave, honored to be on board with you.
So your whole entire career of all the accolades has led you to this, the Righteous Savages. Yes. So here we are. Here we are at the pinnacle of everything. Everything you've accomplished in your life. So it's our honor. We appreciate you being here for sure. So let's talk about also kind of how we got to here and kind of a little backstory about how we know each other. Back in 2012, both of us were at a firearms training class together, and we spent a week together doing some firearms training with Chuck Doan and Mike Vaughn, and had a great week. And I'm sure that wasn't the beginning of your firearms journey at all, but it was the beginning of how we got to know each other, and it was really cool because you had been doing this thing for a while before we ever met up at that point. But it was a real good time to get together and do some firearms training.
Oh, it was a blast.
Yeah. So
and Dave was kind of helping to instruct that, and he got a bunch of windshield glass from the local. They just throw them away. He said, "Well, we can use those." And we're shooting through. They're sitting in a chair and shooting through glass like you're shooting into or out of a car. Some of the best training I ever had. Yeah. It was a great week.
Well, we enjoyed it. It's interesting because the colonel had been doing this job for a while. Very well known already at what he does, the Bulletproof Mind seminar. And we had about a dozen people in this class. And our lead instructor, Chuck Doan, was like, "Hey, Lieutenant Colonel, do you mind kind of giving us a little bit of a preview of your Bulletproof Mind seminar?" And man, you just jumped right in it. You had the chalkboard just covered. It was just chalk dust everywhere. And I thought, the people in this class, they don't know the level of training they're getting right now. They have no idea what's going on, but it's really cool to see you just jump right in and provide that next level.
We're all men of faith. And God's had me in his grip for so long. And I was just your knuckle dragon, prior service paratrooper sergeant, infantry soldier, ranger, qualified. And I got selected to teach psychology at West Point. And I wanted to get my grad degree on the Army's time. And I'm like this square peg that got pounded into a round hole, and I ended up doing the psychology of killing. And I wrote my book on killing and coined the concept of killology. And so, who'd have thought to follow that path? So when we were talking, I talked about, the forebrain, the midbrain, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and I put it in a way that all us knuckle draggers can wrap our mind around and apply it. But what a great path to go from, teaching psych to getting this warrior resiliency, worldwide. I was in the Army 24 years, and then I've been doing this for 26 years out on the road. Oh, it's been a good ride.
Yeah, it was awesome. We appreciate that you shared that with those guys, and we appreciate what you do all the time out there. One of the things, if you've ever been to one of our training classes for years, ever since 2012, I've been doing this drill that I learned and first heard from Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman called the halfway drill. And essentially it's a trigger drill to help students not anticipate the gun go off, or at least not have it affect them in their shooting. It helps with accuracy. And it's been just so extremely helpful for students over a decade.
Well, tell the story you told about the range and the girl.
Right. So anyway, I learned this from the colonel. Essentially, is if you're having a student that's having a problem anticipating the gun going off and they're missing low, then do this drill where you just press the trigger halfway and pause and press the trigger halfway again. And essentially it induces the shooter, it forces them to be surprised. Yep. You will be surprised when the gun goes off.
Halfway back and hold it.
Right. So there's no chance for your subconscious to get involved and to help out. So we had a student in the subsequent class that was struggling extremely, just could not overcome the flinch and the anticipation. And so we had the whole class gather around this student, and she was very nervous. She was actually crying. Tears were streaming down her face from the anxiety and the pressure of now everybody's watching. And we were 5 yards away. We were shooting at a silhouette size target. She was missing horribly. And I said, now we're going to shoot at this quarter size target. And now she's really freaking out. Like, there's no way this can happen. And we coached her through the drill. I said, all you have to do is aim your gun and press the trigger halfway, but don't let the gun go off, and hold, and then press it halfway more and pause. Just don't let the gun go off. And we went through that iteration. The gun went off, scared her half to death, and we looked up, and there was a hole in the middle of that quarter-sized target.
And that's what we mean by a surprise break.
Yeah, and so the light bulb went off, and she understood that you have to operate the trigger with purpose, with intention, not just I hope the gun goes off.
I still do it. I do a lot of shooting. And if I find myself, pulling like that, I'll just stop and do the halfway back. And you're actually training yourself to trick yourself. Yeah. And then you trick yourself enough, it becomes natural to get that surprise break. Yeah. And you got to get back to the basics sometimes and do it with yourself again and bring yourself back to that point.
And that's a Cooper thing from Gunsight for sure, was the surprise break. Yep. And that's really the basis. It's the fundamentals of getting started with shooting, no doubt about it. So after that point, you went off and were continuing to do seminars. We met up a couple times after a couple local seminars. And then I think 2014, you brought some friends and family down to Tombstone Gun Range and did some more training there.
What the mecca of firearms training.
Yeah,
we got front sight, we got gun sight, and we got Tombstone.
Yeah, we do. It's world famous Tombstone. I say that on purpose. We had a local World Series baseball competition, like it was the Colt League World Series held in Marion, Illinois. And so teams literally from all over the world came to Marion to play in this World Series, and there was a bunch of teams. So there was a lot of downtime between games, and one family from the Netherlands decided, hey, there's a gun range, let's go shoot some guns. So we had some kids show up with their mom and dad, and they shot handguns and rifles, never shot guns before. And so since we had some people come from the Netherlands to Tombstone Gun Range, we can officially say we're world famous. Yes. Tombstone Gun Range. So that was pretty cool. And I've noticed over the years of being on the range with you and shooting that you are a gun guy. I mean, you're not just somebody that just hangs out with cops and is kind of on the fringe of things. You really are a gun guy, a 1911 guy, and you've even got some patents for some gun parts. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. My son and I had a little gun business, sheepdog knife and gun. During the pandemic, we just had to kind of shut that down. We had some patented items. So one of the things we have, we call the micro front sight. And you guys were looking at that just today at the range. And when John Browning first made the 1911, it was like 50,000th. The front sight was just a little skinny thing. Think about a rifle sight. Rifle's a little bitty thing. You don't have trouble centering it up. And it's the first thing they changed because it was getting bent. So we got this great big honking thick front sight because it gets bent if you have a skinny one. And so what we did, we patented this little white line right down the center of the sight. Now the two things, surprise break and front sight focus. So I had a guy on my range a little while back doing pretty good shooting, but I told him, man, you can tighten this up another notch. I said, what I want you to do is I want you to focus on that front sight. See that white line down that sight? Focus on it. And he pressed off 3 bullets, all went in the same hole. I said, dude, that's front sight focus. Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Yep, it's absolutely. And as long as we're intentional about what we're doing, a lot of people just hope that everything works out. They hope they hit the target. Yeah. And the thing is nobody's ever been told when it comes to firearms training, most people have never been to a handgun class. They just make it up on their own. They don't really know
I was telling
works.
Dave on the range here, I'll share this story. I was an infantry officer, carried a 1911, and then they changed the Beretta, and I carried my own 1911 then because I didn't want to make the switch. And I shot expert on the range every time, and I thought it was good. And then shortly after I got out of the Army, I went to a gun sight, one of the great shooting meccas, and Clint Smith was there, and I realized I didn't know how to shoot. I mean, I could hold it up and hit the military target, but all of the things that you would, and I was at a level of unconscious ignorance. It was a hard 3 days for the first 3 days of the range, because I had to realize I'm not good at this. The military was teaching me was just the barest possible beginning. If you really want to be good, go to front sight, go to gun sight, go to Tombstone, take a 1-week class, and all of the nuts and bolts you really need to understand how to operate that weapon. Yeah. And what a tragedy.
Yeah, and it's like a journey, just like we were talking earlier about martial arts. You're not going to get involved in that for a day or a week and have it all figured out. And it's the same way with any type of firearms training. It's a journey, and people should understand this is going to take a while. This is going to take some investment of my time, probably some money, and be ready for that long haul. You can shortcut all that and think that you're good, and you're going to be probably sorely mistaken in the worst time.
I was telling Dave, I've got their pistol in my gun range, 32 revolver, and the story was 1932. My great grandmother in New Orleans, sleeping on the second floor. Summer, all the windows are open, pre-air conditioning. Some guy climbs up on the second floor balcony and is coming in, and Granny, it was an ultimate point and click interface. Granny pointed that revolver and pulled the trigger 6 times. The bad guy went away. Next morning, they followed a blood trail out to the alley. But Granny probably never fired more than 20 rounds in her life, and that's okay. But I tell people, just carrying a guitar does not make you a musician. And if you're going to carry that gun, then start pushing the envelope. I'm a huge fan of Hojutsu, the martial art of the firearm, HOJUTSU.com. And that's when I really started pushing the envelope. Gun sight, front sight trained, little IPSC IDPA shooting. And suddenly I'm shooting for my black belt. And I realized once again, I wasn't as good as I thought I was. No. And I trained for 2 years to get my black belt in Hojutsu. I know the shots I was missing, the time hacks I was missing. And it's those 3-day weekends of the Jiu-Jitsu is most fun you'll ever have out on the range. Yeah. But is there anything on earth better than going to the range with good friends?
Not at all.
And fellowship through Gunsmoke. I tell my classes, we make fun of the golfers throughout my whole class. I tell them the golf course is a waste of is a willful and deliberate misuse of a perfectly good rifle range. So, and when we tease the golfers, all that time you spend on the golf course, if you'd have spent that time on the range, think of the skills you'd have walked away with.
Well, I really like to golf, Dave, so I just want to. I take offense to that.
I would say as a follow up, I think that anything that's worth doing in life is a journey, whether it be learning how to cook or learning how to be a good husband or be a good father. It's all a journey. And I think that what we discount and what we try, our culture now is such a microwave culture. They don't want to do the little bitty steps that it takes to get proficient at anything. Yep. It's, I just want to throw this in the microwave, or whatever that means. Is just, I want to throw it in there and get what I want out of it in just a few minutes. And I don't want to really devote myself to the study of an art or a study of a task or an ability. Yes. And that is, I think that's what's lacking in the mindset of culture right now. And what we wanted to do in this whole brotherhood was we were seeing, and I think Dave said something about this earlier, we were seeing these classes where you'd show up for 5 hours, get a little bit of good instruction, learn some really cool concepts, but then the instructor's gone, everybody's gone, and nobody really communicates or builds a community. It's just a bunch of guys showing up to a class. And the way we wanted to do different with this was we want to build a brotherhood. Guys that you can, I call them the 3 a.m. buddies. Guys you can call at 3 a.m. They're going to go help you bury a body.
Well, let me give you an angle on this now. Whatever it is we're doing well. Yeah. I don't mind a microwave, and I'm in a hurry.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what's worthy of our focus?
Right.
And one is the Lord.
Yeah, the Lord's absolutely.
Word. I put out the book On Spiritual Combat. It came out a couple years back, and people, I know Grossman on killing, I know on combat. Let's read On Spiritual Combat. And a lot of bad things happening out there. You take a deep breath, you understand this. It's bring everything to the Lord in prayer. Bring everything in prayer. He's a God of big things and little things. He can handle it all. But sooner or later, we're all going to die. God, give me some more time. Well, sooner or later, that prayer is not going to get answered. And sooner or later, every nation will fall.
Absolutely.
Over my dead body.
You're right.
Everybody dies. Every nation falls. Ultimately, our son will die.
Yeah.
But eternity continues.
Mm-hmm.
Keep your eye on the big picture.
Yeah.
Keep your eye on the ball. And if you got a remote idea there might be eternity out there, there might be something after death, then it is the single most important thing in the universe. So we wrote the book on spiritual combat, which is kind of like basic training. It's equipment issue, the full armor of God, and it's basic drills, and it's basic training. Now, I've got such great response. So we're working on a second book on spiritual warfare. And we had this amazing world-class group of alpha readers, people who volunteered to read through the manuscript, and that's work. It's hard work. Read through the manuscript at various stages and give us feedback. And one of our alpha readers is a guy named Dave Kemp. And Dave, you got a little thing, a quote right up front. May I read this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Got a copy of the book right here. Yeah. And one of the first things you see.
It's actually the very first thing in the book.
Lieutenant Dave Kemp, 28-year veteran police officer, SWAT commander, get ready to be warriored up and do battle. This book will arm you with actionable intelligence so that you can take your spiritual warfare to the next level. That's awesome.
I appreciate that. That was really cool. And I enjoyed it. Was really cool just reading through that and learning. I learned a lot of, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but it was a learning experience and really appreciate the opportunity to
iron
dive
sharpens
in there
iron, brother.
and help that out. So we'll go back to the beginning of your career a little bit. So according to the Google machine, on November 13th, 1974, you enlisted in the Army and went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and it looks like you spent a lot of time.
I went to Fort Ord, California for basic training.
All right,
and then and that was the Army was broken.
Yeah,
that was post-Vietnam. Basic training was pretty much a joke. I mean, they taught me to shoot. They taught the basics, but it was out of control, and we really did have Sarge beating up Beetle Bailey, And
I also heard it was kind of back in the 70s that Army barracks was a little rough and tumble, and somewhere I read that you had the nickname of Spider-Man. Is that right?
I was a young private, then a sergeant, 82nd Airborne Division, from late 1970s. And if you lived in the barracks and you didn't want to do drugs, you had to fight. Because the druggies would, if you just do some drugs and you're not a threat to them. Didn't want to do drugs and you're a threat to them. And I grew up fighting, and I fought a lot. I don't mind fighting. I grew up with the martial arts. But I learned to just get this hatred for the druggies in the barracks. And here's people who are trained to kill, who carry weapons, who are not following the law and not following the rules. The safeguard for every warrior society is face same dilemma. We take our young men, we give them state-of-the-art tools to kill people, state-of-the-art training to kill people, send them to distant lands, give them years of practice killing people, now bring them home. What's to stop them from using their skills on their own people? And I'll cover this in my book on killing and on combat, but ultimately everybody found the same solution: discipline, discipline, discipline. Every warrior society had distinctive haircuts, distinctive uniform. We don't care what your hair looks like, some flaky freaking fashion model. What matters is, whatever the standard is, you obey. And to have people who are our nation's trained killers who are out of control doing drugs in the barracks is terrifying. So I went to OCS. I became a young lieutenant. I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, my first assignment as an officer. And I wasn't going to put up with those druggies in the barracks. I was on the side of the guy in the barracks who wanted to stay straight. The drug users were a total loss. They're not going to re-enlist. They're not playing the game. They're just destroying the people who do want to do the job and make it a career. And I ended up with more drug busts than every other officer in the battalion.
So I guess together. You used to climb up the outside of the
buildings
here,
or body jam. They'd be up there on the third floor in the barracks, the little 4-man rooms in the barracks, and they'd have the door jammed shut so we couldn't get in. They wouldn't answer to the knock, so I'd go out and I'd do a body jam up to the third floor, and the window's open and slide in the window. I got you. Sitting there with his dope suit.
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
You were literally taking your life in your hands back in those days by hunting down and I'm a soldier. I'm supposed to put my life on the line. I'm ready to fight the good fight. They say that, combat is 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror. But it's in the 99% that the battle's won. The training and the preparation and the discipline and the skills ahead of time. So Ronald Reagan became president. We had the urinalysis program. We got rid of the druggies, and our military pivoted on a dime. Most amazing thing I've ever seen.
That's amazing, and you got to have standards. Even in my law enforcement career, you notice in society, they always say that the police do whatever the community wants them to do. But when the community starts saying we don't want you to mess around with the 14-year-olds that are driving around town with no driver's license. We don't want you to really mess with the kids that are, smoking weed on the street corner. We don't want you to mess with the panhandlers. We don't want you to mess with all the small time things that by themselves might not seem that big of a deal. It all starts to add up to where there's no standards, and it becomes the Wild West, and everybody's doing what they want to do, and the level just of order in society starts to go down because nobody wants to keep a certain standard.
New York City, quite a while back, Mayor Giuliani and they turned New York City around, law enforcement wise, and they what they call the broken windows thing.
Right.
If you've got a place and a window's broken, and you just leave it that way, well, pretty soon you have more windows broken. Pretty soon they're all broken. And they're broken into and everything else. But you get a broken window and get right there and replace that window, then the deterioration doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And what you got to do is deal with those things up front. And it's a fundamental, it's like physics. It's a law of physics.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of the little things, in no time at all, you've got a nation of lawlessness with no respect for law and order, with no respect for it. You didn't bust me when I was driving as a juvenile. You didn't bust me. I was doing drugs on the street. What are you doing busting me for shoplifting in this store? And we got this idea now that shoplifters are all Jean Valjean stealing a loaf of bread to feed their family. No, they're not. No. They're just, and that business owner is trying to stay in business. So here we got San Francisco and LA, basically businesses shutting down and leaving because of the shoplifting. So what's the next step? Well, armed robbery of the store. You didn't stop when I shoplifted, and a guy tries to stop me, so I beat him, and it's just this downward spiral that we've got to confront.
Yep.
And it's all about God and righteousness. And the verse for on spiritual warfare is Amos 5:15a: hate evil, love good, maintain justice. Boom. Yep. Spiritual warfare in 6 words.
Says it all right there.
Those 3 things would turn this country around.
Amen. And they're really identifying what we're not doing. We're not hating evil. We're embracing evil and accepting evil. We're not truly loving good, virtuous and righteous and good things. And we are not maintaining justice.
Well, and I think that one of the things that you see is this decoupling of the founding principles of this country with where culture is right now.
Yes.
And that is, to quote Benjamin Franklin, this Constitution is for a moral and religious people.
Yes.
And if we're not a moral and religious people, then the principles, which are biblical principles laid out in the Constitution, are not going to jive with culture. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. That's why there's such an assault on that stuff.
Yes. And we talk about this in non-spiritual warfare. In a republic, or a democracy, republic such as ours, we are the rulers.
Yep.
We're the kings. The people elect their leaders. And look in the Old Testament how God treated rulers who did not bring their nation to righteousness. God brought judgment on the bad kings. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to accept the responsibility for this nation, then go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Because as a citizen of this nation, you are the ruler. And if you're not voting, and you're not voting for righteousness, then you are condemned. You're still saved, and Jesus is still your Savior, and you haven't lost your salvation.
But there is judgment.
Bingo.
There's national judgment.
And our nation will pay the price. But while we're talking about bad things, take just a minute, focus on one of the good things I call the podcast revolution. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, we had 3 networks and 1 or 2 newspapers and half a dozen national magazines, and that was it. That was the only way you get a national voice. Today, we've broken that that control. They had this absolute monopoly on the news. And I've been on 60 Minutes and 2020 back in the day, and it meant nothing. It was a 3-minute soundbite. They controlled what you said, what part they used. People seeking these podcasts, people listening to the podcasts, they want deeper levels of knowledge. People providing, you're not doing this to get rich, people providing the podcast. One of the true things out there that should give us hope for our nation is this podcast revolution. Yep. And the people who are doing it, and most important of all, people are out there listening to it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that we're really excited about is that people are, when you look at, you just look at TV ratings and how they've dipped to almost nothing nowadays. People aren't tuning into mainstream news. They want to hear what everyday people are saying about this stuff, and people that are actually in the fight with them. People, not these super wealthy millionaires that go to their ivory towers after they get done giving the news every night. Their prescripted narrative that has been given down by the billionaires or whatever, and we are a part of that, and we want to see this grow, and that is important.
Like in 1975 or so, you went to Ranger School and graduated as a Ranger. So
1979.
79.
8-79.
Man, the Google stuff was way off.
You got to be careful with Google.
Way off on their information. I apologize. Yeah. Regardless, though, what did that experience do for you as far as building a resiliency and just having a sense of accomplishment? What was it like after you jumped into Victory Pond and you got a Ranger tab? What did that mean to you?
Well, 50 years ago, I can tell where I was. I was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week on a Wildcat oil rig in January, February, March, April of 1974 on the Panhandle of Nebraska. And there we were, 20 degrees below, out on an oil rig, Wildcat oil rig. They didn't know how to spell OSHA, let alone comply. And it was the most dangerous thing I've ever done. I was 17 years old, lied about my age. And 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. Man, a lot of money. But man, I was just exhausted. I mean, and this is a hard job, and it was hard work. And we had a commute every day, too. We all carpooled. And it pushed me hard. And it was cold, and it was bitter, and it was hard work. And I was among men, the Wildcat oil riggers, and they were true men. They were hard men. And it was just the most amazing thing. And that was the only thing that even remotely prepared me for Ranger School. Because Ranger School was days without food and days without sleep. And I was exhausted. And all you had to do was quit. Just say, I'm done. I don't want to do this no more. And all of the pain, days without food, days without sleep, we were all having hallucinations. On the third day without sleep, you're psychotic. And our hallucinations almost always revolved around food.
Pizza.
A guy would see, a guy's trying to feed quarters into the tree because he swear it's a soda machine. Guys are seeing the golden arches and staggering out through the woods, and it was just mind-boggling. Nothing I've ever done has been that hard. Nothing ever, no matter what happened. I mean, you got guys in Vietnam would joke about, we're laying there under fire, and well, at least we're not still in Ranger School. I mean, we got a good night's sleep, got a full stomach. From that point on,
there's a couple of bullets flying around, but
I mean, really, for the rest of your life, say, well, I've had a decent night's sleep, and I got a full stomach. What's the big deal? There's no KIAs, there's no WIAs, nobody's dead, nobody's wounded. What have I got to complain about? It was hard to wrap your mind around it. I mean, the Navy SEALs are amazing people, but they will not go to Ranger School. They refuse to. They don't like to do without food. They don't want to do that. They've already done their thing. God bless them. But Ranger School really is the best of the best. I'm a life member of the Army Ranger Association. And just being a member of the Ranger Battalion for short periods of time does not qualify you to be a member. Mm-hmm. But the very first qualification is to wear the Ranger tab. Boom. Life member, Army Ranger Association. The other way to be a member of the association is to have served in combat in a Ranger unit or to have been a member of the Ranger unit for, I think, a minimum of 6 months or something like that to really qualify and to be a member. But in the end, what defines a Ranger unit is that the vast majority are Ranger qualified.
Yeah.
They're all people who have sucked. Yeah. They've gone without food. They've gone without sleep. I'm talking week after week after week after week. I'm a scrawny little sucker. I went through OCS, infantry officer basic, in the prime of my life, and I lost 20 pounds in Ranger School. About a decade later, they began to start giving people more food because they realized they were doing lifelong harm to the food deprivation on Ranger School. And but the point is that here's what makes the Ranger Regiment, the Ranger Battalion, is they are all Ranger qualified. And what Ranger School does is it grinds deep into your soul the troop leading procedures. I'll tell you a story. You know, I was a young infantry captain, company commander at Fort Ord, California, 7th Infantry Division. We're going to Carmel Baptist Church. And one of the deacons there is a guy named Jerry Ledzinski. And Jerry had been number 4 in his class at West Point. He'd gone to the 82nd Airborne, Dominican Republic, which is a little flash during the time. And then he went to Vietnam, and he was a Special Forces A-Team leader. And the A-Team leaders behind enemy lines in Cambodia, Laos, and North Vietnam, that's what they did. They went behind enemy lines and raised and trained insurgents in Cambodia, Laos, and North Vietnam. And of the A-Team leaders who did that job, I was reading a book about Special Forces. One of them survived 2 6-month tours. And then there was one who survived 5 6-month tours. And his name was Jerry Ledzinski. And I said, Jerry, is this you? Were you the one that survived, more than twice as many combat tours as Special Forces A-Team leader than anybody ever? Was this you? He said, yeah, Dave, that was me. I said, well, how did you do that? He says, Dave, it was all Ranger School. The troop leading procedures. You know, he said, today I'm a businessman. I have a multi-million-dollar business. And I use the military troop leading procedures, backward planning, I give an op order and a frag order. I give warning orders. But our book on spiritual warfare is actually 22 warning orders, the warning and the order, and that's what Ranger School does. All that's grounded your soul is the next mission and the next mission, and you're in a leadership position, and you got to have situation, mission, execution, service support, command and signal. Boom. God, where I'm going, where I'm going to do. And these are the single best problem-solving mechanism the world's ever seen. And it gets grinded in your soul, this military, under the incredible acid test of centuries of warfare. We have designed this military troop leading procedure, the op order, the warning order, the backward planning process, GOTWA, everything that comes with it, MET-T and OCOCA. These are all tools for problem solving that are the best the world's ever seen, grounded in your soul. And Jerry Ledzinski said, Dave, it was Ranger School. All I had to do was do the things that were burned into our soul in Ranger School, and that stuff works.
Yeah, we need so many more people, so many more men in America need that. They need that type of resiliency to start standing up for what's right in America. And I don't know how your faith, kind of where were you at with your Christian faith back then? Was church something you grew up in, or did that develop more strongly like during the military, or kind of did you grow up in church? Tell me about that.
I married a pretty little girl. She's my bride of 48 years now. It was just a little over 50 years ago I proposed to her. She was 15. I was 17 when I proposed to her. I tell people we are from Arkansas,
Of course.
And 2 years later, she married a crazy Army paratrooper. They'd been in this rifle for 48 years. But she was a pretty little blonde Baptist girl. And God's used pretty girls to bring a lot of people to the Lord across the years.
A lot of warriors.
But she prayed for me, and I was going to night school. Young sergeant, 82nd Airborne, going to night school to get a 2-year degree to go to OCS. That was my goal. And I took a philosophy class, and a guy named David Howell, he had a philosophy degree from Duke, but he was a local pastor. And he showed me that it was an absolutely rational thing to believe in God. And I tried to put that on spiritual combat, on spiritual warfare. That's a rational, good, and reasonable thing to do. You got to understand that 2,000 years ago, something amazing happened. And 4 literate accounts, 11 of the 12 disciples died for their faith. Men don't die for a lie. They really saw it happen. Doubting Thomas touched the side of Jesus' wound. It really happened. They saw him come back and they knew that there was a life after death. They absolutely knew it. They believed it. And there's solid Roman history that their disciples, that second generation of disciples, they all died for their faith because their disciples died for their faith. And they didn't have to. Our faith says you can say, okay, I really don't believe it. It's all a big lie. And boom, you're good to go. And the concept of eternal salvation, you haven't lost your faith. You haven't lost your faith because somebody forced you to say, okay, it was all a big game. I don't believe it. They didn't have to do that. But they wanted the world to know that death has no power. That I know when I die, I'm going to a better place because I have seen my Savior come back from the grave. And today, the largest religion on the planet, regardless of what you believe, they believe. And it became the Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire that held back the barbarian hordes for 1,000 years. People, no empire lives over 100 years, 200 years. Baloney. The Byzantium Empire lived over 1,000 years. And it was Christianity that sustained them and empowered them and carried them through this time. So David Howell basically convinced me that I came to the Lord with my head. It was a rational and right and reasonable thing to do. And kind of, one of the great philosophers said that, if you're wrong, you lose nothing. And if you're right, you gain everything. Everything. It's the most rational, prudent thing for anybody to do. And so I became active in his church, and my wife and I, and a little while later I became a deacon in the church, and then went to OCS and active, and our faith just built and built. And I was a baby Christian back in those days, but my faith just built over time. But the combination of a pretty girl and a philosophy teacher brought me to the knowledge of the Lord, and
that's awesome. And having that foundation to start out with has got law enforcement and the military are crucibles for being influenced by counterculture.
Yes.
And you'd better, have something to believe in, or you're going to fall for anything type of thing. And it can be crushing if you don't have your head on straight.
Yes.
And so it's cool to hear how that kind of helps sustain you through
Praise God.
Your marriage, your career, all of that. And speaking of crazy, the last 3, 4, 5 years, as far as our culture and society has been kind of wild. And I know it's, I guess, essentially post George Floyd era. There's been a lot of critics that have called your training, they call it fear-based training now. We're trying to scare people into certain things. What would you say to the people that call it that?
The mayor of Minneapolis said you cannot go to Grossman's training, even on your own time. This fear-based training. And they really included some of the top trainers. They've been attacking like Caliber Press and Force Science Institute. These are people that are certified to present in court. And these defund the police guys are attacking this. And the mayor of Minneapolis said, well, you can't go to this training, and kind of certified, Grossman and Caliber Press and this other stuff. And so the union, essentially the FOP of the Union of Minneapolis Police said, you can't tell us what to do on our own time. And they brought me in and had me training their cops. And then they had the mayor's police advisory board. These are all citizens who are the mayor's advisory board, and they went to my class. In the class, they said, we got no problem with this. Well, why do you call it warrior training? I said, no, don't. That's a term that they've used. I talk about sheepdogs. I don't use that term. And the mayor's advisory council came back and said, there's nothing wrong with this. This is goofy. What are you doing? And the union basically came out and said, you can't tell us what to do. So what does the media report? Well, the mayor of Minneapolis says that this guy's training is bad, but they don't give the rest of the story. And the truth is, every step of the way, we've came out on top. We've Cancel culture came at us 100 miles an hour. So we rebranded. God brought an amazing Christian man into my office, a retired police detective, homicide detective out of Arizona by the name of Mike Baldwin. Retired police detective with an MBA in business innovation. How many of those are there on the planet? Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for a new right-hand guy to come in and take over ops. And this guy applies, and it's one of the low point of my life. My wife is having medical complications, the pandemic. I'm carrying the business on my back, dipped into savings to be able to keep paying my staff and sustain us. And we're doing a lot of remote work, a lot of podcasts, and carried us on through that. And now we're back up and rocking 100 miles an hour. But it was a hard time, and yet. The truth is that we've come out the other end stronger. The defund the police thing has completely imploded. The population is beginning to understand that this is insane. The backlash in the opposite direction, the lack of control of our borders, that people are becoming enraged. I mean, we send 10,000 to Chicago, and they're broken. Meanwhile, there's millions coming into Texas. How do you expect Texas to deal with hundreds of thousands when a couple of thousand breaks Chicago and breaks New York City? But all of a sudden, they're complaining about the borders.
Yep. Yeah, and on that, I know that you've done a lot of talks about terrorism and kind of how that infiltrates a country. And let's talk about that for a minute. Like, what is the threat of? We have this open border where hundreds of thousands of people are coming across the border every month, and you see the vast majority of the ones that I see on video are military-age males.
Yep.
We don't know what country of origin they come from. So what does that say for the likelihood of a terrorist attack?
I'll give you an angle on this. One of the things this administration and the media tries to make go away is the collapse of Afghanistan.
Yes.
Now, you got to understand something. Russia was in Afghanistan for 10 years. Russia left. They immediately followed them home. And they began to give them absolute pure hell. You hunted us down like dogs for 10 years. Now it's our time. Yep. It is a part of their culture. You kill one of us, we got to kill one of yours.
Yeah, tribal culture.
Even if you like, we kind of like you guys, but we're sorry, this is the rule. You kill some of ours, we got to kill some of yours. And the primary thing, one of the most horrendous things, the single worst attack in Russia, was the Bestland School massacre, which they took an entire school, they held them hostage, they without food, without water for 3 days, 1 day away from death by dehydration. I tell people, nobody in this audience has gone 24 hours without a drop of water. What's it feel like on the third day? There's a school of 1,000 children, most of them elementary age. No food, no water, no bathroom facilities. They crap themselves and piss themselves where they sat for 3 days. Every adult male was dead in the first half hour. If you're an adult male, it's just like this, you fight from the beginning because you will be dead on your knees in front of your children's eyes the first half hour. And when the smoke finally cleared, now over 300 dead, the vast majority of them elementary-age children. Nation stunned to their soul, and this is payback. We don't kill you, we kill your kids. And they've already been around this block. So here we are, we're in Afghanistan for 20 years. We had the Taliban down like dogs. We went in their caves, we went in their homes, hunted them down, we killed the Taliban like dogs wherever we found them, and then we left. Hey, no hard feeling, guys. And they have an entire nation to fund and train, equip, and deploy. We left $7 billion of military equipment, an entire nation, a burning desire for vengeance. And oh, by the way, they've already been around this block once. And we can tell you exactly what they did last time. And unlike the Russians, who have a pretty high degree of control of their borders, we have completely given up control of our borders. We have untold thousands, millions over the years coming across our borders. And there could be no doubt if you want to come and attack our nation, and it's just like 9/11, wait for a special day, everybody get on the plane, hijack the plane, and fly it into a building. So we don't know what's coming up next. But if we predict future behavior based on past behavior, there was 1 year in Afghanistan when the Taliban hit schools 600 times in 1 year. Their own schools and their own kids and their own nation 600 times a year. You think they won't do it to us? Is what they did to Russia. So we don't know the future, but if we predict future behavior based on past behavior, one of the things common is pick a day and hit daycares and hit elementary schools and hold them hostage and make and murder them over time and rig up in the Bestland school massacre in Russia. They had bombs rigged with the dead man switch, and the bombs went off and blasted children out the windows. And if we predict future behavior based on past behavior, this is what's coming. It's coming like a freight train. Yep. Now here we are in Israel. Once again, it's the right thing. It's a good thing. But the entire, this whole Muslim world is saying, you're evil. You're supporting Israel. Well, Israel is, in Pearl Harbor, the Japanese attacked a military target and killed a little over 1,200 people. And just a couple years later, we nuked cities. We firebombed Tokyo for 2 nights, killed over 100,000 people and made 1 million people homeless. That's war. You killed 1,200 of our people at Pearl Harbor. we nuke cities and firebomb cities and kill 100,000 in 2 nights and make 1 million homeless. That's war. If you don't want to deal with that, then don't attack us. They attacked a civilian target in Israel. This slaughter and murder and rape of women and children. One of the most horrendous, vicious acts in modern history. And Israel is going ahead, and they're righteous in their fury and they're right in their goal that we have to tell these people, you will not succeed. We'll hunt every one of you down. We will kill every one of you. And this is war. But meanwhile, here's the people that are ticked off from Afghanistan that are saying, look at these evil people. Look what they're doing right now. And once again, the probability of these terrorist attacks coming and trying to hurt us, and how do they hurt you? They don't piss in your water. They don't sprinkle dew over your sky. They come kill your kids. And the idea of school massacres and daycare massacres is very, very much in the cards for these people. We've got Boko Haram, which is a Islamic terrorist group in northern Africa. Their very word, Boko Haram, means Western schooling is evil. Boko means book, any book other than the Quran. Haram is a religious word, forbidden, evil, sinful. The most common translation of Boko Haram, Western schooling is evil. And across northern Africa, they've wiped out schools and daycares by the thousands. Wherever children are, they go and attack. And, we've got the Nigerian schoolgirls, where they come from schools. They go to school. They murder every living creature except the girls they want to rape. They declare these girls brides. They can have all the brides they want. They take them with to the next school, and again. Where the Nigerian schoolgirls from schools that they attacked and massacred and slaughtered across northern Africa.
That's one of the biggest problems I see with civilization in America these days is people don't really see the evil. They don't want to see it. They deny the reality of it, and they pretend it doesn't exist. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I don't know how you could go defend what happened to Israel, and people are doing it. They're protesting for the other side. And when people don't see that, refuse to see it, you're just begging for something horrible to happen to you. And if Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman were elected president in November 2024, what's the first couple things you would do? What's important, do you think, for our elected leaders to do in America, inside of our country?
Well, first and foremost, I think anybody's got to be in full agreement to total control of our borders. And second, to systematically hunt down the illegal people that are in our borders and get them under control in various ways. This whole border thing has been a political drive. If it were conservatives coming across the border who are going to vote Republican, Nancy Pelosi would be arm in arm with everybody else stopping them coming across the border. They've got this model in their head. These people are going to come across the border and they're going to vote Democratic, and we're going to make them all citizens, and we're going to give them the vote, and they're going to turn the tide for us. And it's all a political, very open, straightforward political power grab to bring people on board. But what's happened is they've lost the Hispanic vote. They've lost most of the black vote. They've lost the inner city vote through this blatant power grab by bringing in these vast numbers of people who will assimilate and vote Democratic. And this backfired on them. But it's an evil, intentional, systematic power grab, and it's the first thing anybody has to do is get control of those borders, and finish the wall and do all that come with it, and get control of all these people who come into our borders. And these are things that we can do, and it's got to be the very first requirement. You know, the foundation of every civilization is public safety. Now, here's the social contract. The Pharaoh, the Romans, us. Here's the deal. You obey the law, you pay your taxes, and we'll help keep you safe. Isn't that the deal? If we can't keep them safe, why would they obey the law? Why would they pay their taxes? This is the baseline of every civilization is public safety. You know, every city, every county, every state, every nation, if you can't get public safety right, nothing else works. Nothing. And you are a broken nation who have failed in your fundamental responsibility. Crime in our cities have exploded like nothing we've ever seen. 2020, an explosion of crime. Homicides exploded over 30%. We've never seen more than a 12% annual increase. The George Floyd effect, homicides exploded. And this year, the police are reporting, well, homicides are down a little bit, but the crime survey says crime is way up. We survey Americans, and they say crime has exploded. The cops are saying, well, we're reporting less murders. Well, we just lost control of whole portions of our city. Murders are happening, they aren't being even reported, or, we've lost control. And we had all-time record number of cops shot in the line of duty last year. And they know where to not go to be assassinated, where to not go to be executed. They've just written off whole parts of our society. Things are coming unglued. Public safety, parts of our inner cities do not even have law enforcement support anymore. And they're the ones that are screaming for more cops. That the whole defund the police thing is completely turned around in our cities. And we need to get control of public safety. The first and foremost responsibility of our nation is to protect our citizens. And we have failed.
And I think one of the other things that is not talked about as nearly enough is we have a lot of good cops. I know a lot of good cops. This guy right here, Amen. But I know a lot of guys in law enforcement that are good guys that want to do the right thing, that want to protect people. And I think that next level up is really where a lot of the problem is. There's well documented evidence that George Soros funded a lot of these district attorneys' elections to get ideologues elected instead of people that would actually enforce the law and back these guys up. They go and actually make an arrest, and that guy's out on bail or just let go a couple of hours later. Well, you can't police people that way.
This brings us back to our fundamental biblical responsibility to city government. Over and over, the Bible tells us about the cities and their responsibility to rule the cities righteously. And so, do you even know who's on your city council? Do you even know who's in charge of your county? Do you know what kind of leadership and elected officials are in your counties? Are you even remotely in control of your cities? Are you running for city council? Are you running for school board? If we're down there in the grassroots, we got to reach out and get control of those things. This is something we can immediately influence, is running for school board, running for city council, finding out who's running, finding out what their background is and who we endorse, and our churches endorsing city council members or the FOP, the law enforcement, should be standing up and saying, we do not endorse this candidate. We endorse these candidates. And across America, cops tell us, well, my FOP, which is kind of the police union, if you will, the fraternal organization of police or whatever your police unit, well, FOP won't get involved in local. Then run for head of the FOP under this idea that we will get involved in local politics and we will endorse candidates and we will stand up and say the FOP says do not elect this individual. And if we had police unions, the fire guys do that all the time. The fire guys are knee deep in politics, and somehow the cops think they don't need to get involved. They need to. All of us need to get involved.
Pay attention to what's going on.
And I think you pointed out another great point is that the churches need to be bringing up righteous men.
Yes.
And women to fulfill these roles and getting behind them.
Yes.
Because we should be raising these people up in our churches
and running them for office.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest issues we've seen the last couple of decades where the church has kind of backed out of the political world. They don't really want it because it's so messy and it's so divisive and stuff. Well, Jesus was divisive. The Bible is the most divisive book in the history of mankind because it tells you that you're a sinner and it tells you that you're not doing well, and it's offensive to people. So we shouldn't back away from divisive things, but we should raise up people of righteous and moral and principled people that are going to stand up and say, no, we're going to do justice. We're going to hate evil.
And run them for school board and run them for city council.
Yes.
Or find out who's on the city council that the church will endorse or not endorse.
Yep.
And we've got so much that we could be doing down at the grassroots level, and everything else will come with it. If we regain control of the cities, and you're so right, it's those, America is very unique in our leadership, and that we elect our law enforcement leaders. I was in England training the cops a while back, and a high-level person having lunch with one of their top people, and you Americans, you elect your law enforcement leaders. I'm going to find some guy and elect him to be my dentist. I said, well, I see where you're coming from. The truth is that it works. And law enforcement is accountable to the local people. We have over 10,000 sheriffs, over 10,000 police chiefs, all of whom are accountable to the local elected officials. And we have well over 1,000 sheriffs, all of whom answer only to the local voters. And that's our great strength, is we're decentralized.
The power of the lesser magistrate.
Yes. As soon as the left gets control of the state, the first thing to do is get rid of the sheriffs. They either eliminate them or they gut them so they have no authority and no power, because they want to centralize power.
I always told my high up cop buddies, being a chief of police in a town is very difficult because you are hamstrung by the people they're controlling.
Yes.
Sheriffs can essentially do what they want to do for 4 years, and if the people don't like it, we'll move on to the next person. But they are free to really do what they feel is right to do.
And
so
it works.
we'll kind of pump the brakes here a little bit on the serious stuff. So Dave, let's say your entire family's out of town, you're by yourself at home, you got 2 hours. What are you going to do? Like what interests you, like hobby wise, or if you had time to work on something really fun, what would you do?
Well, I got a range in my basement.
Hey man,
it's nothing fancy.
We're way behind.
It's nothing fancy.
I guess I need to knock that wall.
We should have built a range here first.
I've got a good vent system. They came in and put it in, a good ventilation system, and I fire clean ammo.
We've got a fan over here,
and I've got a big pile of rubber bricks. And I like to shoot.
So is the wife okay with the range in the basement?
She is. They've got some baffling. They put in some. The ceilings are just this kind of 2-inch rubber sheets, and so they put a little baffling, and outside the house, it's not like somebody's pounding on a board, and in the house, it sounds like somebody's pounding on a board right beside you. Mm-hmm. But that's it, But I like to shoot. I don't get there near as much as I should. We just restocked on ammo, and I'll be able to spend a little more time down there.
Yeah,
but I really believe in that. I think that if you get, if you're going to carry a gun, you need to be good. I just had a wonderful time at Tombstone Range with a couple of amazing guys, some neat drills that they gave us, and then I gave them. I gave you a couple of, iron sharpens iron.
Absolutely.
A great time together on the range, a fellowship. But, one of the things I do is I teach shooting, and I love it. And so many law enforcement leaders are embarrassed to be on the range because they can't shoot well. Mm-hmm. And what I tell them is, we got to nurture an environment of shooters. I've co-presented. I'll be at the NRA speaking all 3 days coming up, and I've been at almost every NRA annual convention. And I talk about a guy named Greg Stevens, Officer Greg Stevens, May of 2015, Draw the Prophet Muhammad Art Festival. In the eyes of Islam, to draw the prophet's a terrible crime. Greg Stevens had been a traffic cop for 37 years. Never fired his weapon a life and death event. But Greg had signed on for what he thought was 5 hours of easy overtime, providing security at the South Gate to the Draw the Prophet Muhammad Art Festival. And 2 art critics from Arizona showed up with AK-47 body armor. They had body armor, they had rifles, they had the element of surprise. They rolled out of the vehicle, and from 40 feet away, over 30 rounds of rifle fire fired at Greg Stevens, didn't hit once. From 40 feet away, he's got incredible marksmanship. Killed them both in an incredible feat of marksmanship and courage and skill in American history. Wyatt Earp needed Doc Holliday and two brothers take out three bad guys. Greg Stevens took two of them out, with no warning. Greg says two things. He said, first off, he said his department had an open range and ammo available on a steady basis. When the range was open, ammo available, most of the time he'd be there. Go to the range on you. Sometimes on your own time, not even paying you. Go to the range for it. I'm a Texas cop. I live on dirt. The range is open. The ammo's available. It's like a free day at the carnival. He said, for 37 years, I made a monthly deposit in a savings account. May of 2015, I made a major withdrawal. Greg Stevens also said, he says, I'm a man of God. So I felt like, he said he had a sight picture with every shot. Not a perfect sight picture, but just as soon as he could get back on the sights, he pressed the trigger. He's firing a Glock. And he said, God put his hand on my shoulder. He said, I'll take care of you, but you got to take care of them. And I back to my range in the basement. Nothing fancy, but that's where I like to spend a little time when I get a chance and work some drills.
Yeah, I've prayed a lot of prayers before any of our SWAT team missions or high risk stuff that, God, I pray that nothing bad happens, but if it does, let my aim be true.
Yes. Praise God.
Let me do what needs to be done in those situations. Amen. So something else I want to get into is just about the family life. We're righteous savages. We talk about shooting, we talk about law enforcement and military, and we talk about all this stuff a lot. I don't want to take away from the fact that at the core of us as fathers, as Christians, is the love we have for other people. We're commanded to love others above ourselves. Yes. And one of the ways we see that in our families is with our children, grandchildren. I've got two granddaughters now. And, we always tell, I've got a niece that just had a baby recently, Ashlyn, and I told her and her husband, you don't know what love is until you have a child. It's like you're just pretending to know what love is. Then you have a kid and it's crazy. And then you have grandchildren and it's times 100. So I think, that's the type of love that God has for us, is that same type of fatherly, or parent to child love. And that's what guides us. That's the reason why we work those dangerous details. That's the reason why in law enforcement we do this job for the bigger cause and the love we have for people. In law enforcement, we have something called the priority of life scale. It's innocent people first, then the cops, then the bad guys. And you hear this saying a lot where it says, well, our main job as police is to go home every night. No, it's not. Your main job as a cop is to make sure all the innocent people go home every night, which means you might be in a pretty dangerous place and it might mean you get injured. And I'm not saying we're wanting to get into suicide missions here, but truly the people we serve are at a higher place than ourselves. And we learn that. I learned that even more with, being with kids and grandkids, and we try to balance our lives with that, with family and kids and what we do with them to help keep us grounded and to help keep us have a good perspective of what all this means. So one of the main reasons we're here today is to kind of talk about this book on spiritual warfare and how, this is really cool. I got to, obviously got to help read this thing a little bit before it came out, like you talked about earlier. But this concept is pretty cool because it's based on military. Mainly law enforcement uses the same type of concept with warning orders. I'd never heard about this guy named Erasmus before, really. I heard of Martin Luther before. I think it's where the Lutheran Church comes from and that. But what do you think Martin Luther and Erasmus, what's their effect on the world and society? Yeah. What have they done that's helped us so much?
500 years ago that Erasmus put out his 22, we call them orders or principles for living a virtuous life in a violent world. And this is one of the most prominent, influential, amazing men of his time. And then Martin Luther responded with 22 warnings to go with each of those orders. Said, hey, here's the warning. We put them together into a warning order. And I pray that we can be a blessing to people to reach back and find the old that is strong and the deep roots are not touched by the frost. But, when we talk about family, The other book that we've got out here is, one of my other books came out last year is on hunting. And one of the best ways to prepare for combat is to hunt. One of the best ways to prepare your kids is to hunt. The discipline, the structure, the rules, to know what's inside living creatures and to be intimately familiar with it. It means food on the table. And the first time you gut a deer, it means food on the table. And you see it from young. If the first time you see and smell what's inside a living creature, some terrible crime scene, some horrible accident scene, some combat scene, we set you up for failure. You should have been exposed to that from your youngest days. If you have to use deadly force in defense of people's lives, you should have had experience with shooting, critters and putting food on the table. Before you to have to shoot a member of your own species, you should have had a lot of experience shooting other species. And the book on hunting is really, there's this triad I've always wanted to do: on killing, on combat, and on hunting. Can't understand who we are and what we do until we hunt.
Yeah.
But this whole idea of the family, and you know what, we talk about spiritual warfare. In warfare, you win in large part by killing the enemy. In spiritual warfare, you win by saving them. And that's powerful.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? Jesus put it, how do we do that? He says, a new commandment I give you, to love others as I have loved you. We're under a new commandment. And to love people, as you say, to love God and love people more than self. This is our commandment. And, and Jesus said, greater love is no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. So what manner of love is this? That men and women walk out the door and die for strangers. What manner of love is this? That men and women walk out the door every day and put their life on the line for people they never even met. That's our cops and our first responders. And we talk in the book about what makes a great cop, what makes a great sheepdog, a great first responder is empathy. Empathy is love with the shoes on in action. Because that great cop says, what if it was my child that had been abused? What if it was my family trapped in that burning building? That's empathy. What if it was my business that's being ransacked and robbed? What if it was my spouse that had been attacked? That's love. That's empathy. That's what sustains us and carries us. So you're so right about our love for our family, but our first responders and our sheepdogs who are willing to put their life on the line for strangers represent one of the greatest levels and manifestations of love anybody could ever want. And they represent what's true and good and strong about our nation. They walk out the door and put their life on the line for people they never even met. And listen to that verse one more time. Greater love is no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. But there are many ways to lay down your life. Mm-hmm. There are many ways to lay down your life. And sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. Mm. To do a dirty, dangerous, thankless job every day of your life to the utmost of your ability, because if nobody did it, our civilization no longer exists. Not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. And they're all around us, people who are doing that. And we should honor them and recognize them and who they are and what they do.
Yep, absolutely. Amen. Amen to that, brother. So this is the latest book, everybody, on spiritual warfare. Dave Grossman, Chris Pascoe. It's a really good read. A lot of times, I've never really been a big reading type of guy, but this reads really easy. There's a lot of stories in here. It's not like you're reading an encyclopedia. It is great, especially for the guys, men of faith. This will really, really strengthen your resolve and your faith.
Praise God.
Highly recommend this. And also, I got one more thing for you. We talked earlier today, and you said that you feel like you're always trying to fight. I don't want to be getting old. I'm 52 years old. I don't want to be getting old. So, I'm kind of proud of this patch that I found. And I don't know about you, but every day I wake up and I feel like, you know what? I think today this is like the best day.
Yes.
I think I'm in my – so I've got a patch from the Tombstone movie from Doc Holliday. It says, I'm in my prime. So I'll give that to you, sir.
I'm going to put this to good use.
Put that on.
I'm in my prime, baby.
Put that on.
This is it. These are the days. You know, Lauren Daigle, a Christian singer, I like a lot of her stuff, but one of her current hits is, "These are the days." You know, the good old days. This is it.
Yeah.
Make the most of them and enrich them and grasp them. Hug your loved ones and break the bones and suck the marrow from every day you've been blessed with. Because these are the days, and I am in my prime.
Yeah, awesome. So we highly appreciate you and Mike coming out to the range, doing some shooting with us. It's such an honor to have you here and helping out and joining the podcast. So everybody get the book. We appreciate you coming out and helping us out with this. And speaking of sucking the marrow out, we're about to go suck the marrow out of some good T-bone steaks pretty soon. So for everybody out there, appreciate you watching. Stay in contact with us on all of our social media out there, YouTube, all that good stuff. If you have comments, questions for the Colonel, please send them in, and we'll be glad to try and answer those for you. But thanks for watching. Until next time, it's Righteous Savages. Thank you.
Iron sharpens iron. God bless. God bless America.